This week in Arsenal, the Gunners get linked to Marcus Rashford. Arsenal still have had a better season than Manchester United, and that's about it. It's quiet, too quiet. Let's get into it.
Maybe we'll have a good surprise for you.
Welcome in to This Week in Arsenal, and I just realized that version of the intro that I hit does not have little things on the side, so I'll have to fix that at some point. But as always, I'm Sham. You can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale. Welcome into episode 58 of This Week in Arsenal. It is Tuesday, May 29th, 2024, and we are coming to you in our second week of no Arsenal. Sash is not here. He's decided to use the time to take a well-earned vacation. And so it's just me. But I do have the pleasure of being joined by two magnificent friends, two illustrious guests. The first one being Rohan at new handle alert at Rohan Javon AFC. Rohan, how are you doing, sir?
I'm good. I think this is my fourth time on the channel. I think the fourth time.
I think so.
It's always good. And the handle, I don't know how I feel about it. I feel like I was pressed into making a change and I suffered. I wasn't able to play out of the pressure. So I eventually just, changed it. I don't know how I feel about it, to be honest. But I'm not changing it anymore now. Like this is set. And yeah, it's going to be there forever now, I think. So.
I like it. It's very inoffensive, very like straight to the point, business like, and I think that's all you can ever really ask for from a handle. Also joining us is the one, the only Curran, who you can find on Twitter now at CurranTOF. Curran, how are you doing, good sir?
I'm all good, brother. I was saying to you guys before, it's nice to have a bit of a break. Towards the end of the season, it was just getting a bit much, even though last day was incredible vibes, especially being at the stadium and being around the people. But I'm really glad for this break. I can't be asked with football right now. It's lovely talking to you guys about football, but I can't watch more football right now. I can't do it right now. So it's just good just to have a bit of a chat and discuss and have a bit of a lowdown on what happened and what will happen, etc., etc. And I think this is the time of the year where you have the most, what I find personally, the most growth in terms of actually what you think about football going forward. I feel like every summer I get more and more in tune with how I feel about the game. And it'll be interesting to see what you guys think about this window and any sort of tactical things me and Rohan and you too, Sham, will talk about going forward in terms of how signings can fit in, or what happened in the past, what kind do we need to get into, and all these different types of things. So yeah, looking forward to it. And that's about it, really.
Yeah. Well, I agree with your sentiment where, it's just a nice time to kind of sit back, take stock, get a bit of a breather. I think things did get very stressful there, especially near the end of the season for good reason. But, it's just nice to kind of do a little post-mortem and chat about, how the season went and how things can improve or change moving forward. So on the topic of transfers, there was one that I think, or at least there was a link that has really sparked a lot of debate, I think, in the Arsenal community. And that has to do with Mikel Arteta allegedly getting in touch with Marcus Rashford from Manchester United. At least that was tweeted out by AFC Camden. And that has kind of led to some mixed reviews, I think, based on the kind of player Rashford is, where we'd be signing him from, things of that nature. So, Rohan, I'll hand this off to you first. What do you make of the Rashford link? Is he a player that you would like at Arsenal? or is this someone that you would just rather stay away from for the time being?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's like, as a lot of people allude to, another Arteta save me project, and something that he tends to like to do. I do think with the Rashford links, I look at where we are essentially lacking. I'm talking about in terms of the front line. I think the success that teams have had against us this season are that mid block type of side who effectively squeeze the center of the pitch and they're looking to control those spaces and are happy to go in behind if we do play that ball over the top, because they see Arsenal as not having that level of threat, especially without Gabriel Martinelli. So, in order for them to drop their lines of engagement, is what I refer it to, is you want someone who can stretch the pitch and go in behind, and that's something that Marcus Rashford does really well. We saw it in the final of the FA Cup most recently, what he's capable of doing in terms of on the shoulder and stretching the pitch. And from a profile point of view, he ticks a lot of boxes, and the quality is undeniable in terms of in possession when you're talking about ball striking, in terms of off both feet as well. He's very strong, and someone who is capable of hitting 30 goals a season, you can't not look at that. In a team in which you're looking at Eric Ten Hag, and a lot of Manchester United fans look at Marcus Rashford and they see him as being one of the reasons as to why they are where they are. But Marcus Rashford was one of the reasons why Manchester United had a respectable season last year, on paper. And I think that he adds a lot of tools that we do lack across the front line. The question marks are around the finances. The finances are very, very significant. And, if he was on the wage that he's at Manchester United at Arsenal, he would be a highest earner. And that's something I'm not comfortable with. I believe that if it was an option, he'd need to take a wage cut. And I also think that the actual transfer fee in itself needs to be around that Kai Havertz type of money. I think if it was that type of deal, I'd certainly entertain it. Even though that there are areas of concern, particularly out of possession, but I look at it and see it from the perspective of, if Mikel Arteta wants him, he will believe that he can do the out of possession requirements that he expects, and that is the key to our success. When you look at Arsenal, of what's changed consistently season in, season out, irrespective of the dynamics, it's our line height. Our line height has increased every single year under this coach, and that's down to recruitment, and that's down to his philosophy of being so secure and so strong without the ball in all aspects. Statistically, we're the best team in the league, one of the best teams in Europe, out of possession in the press, and also I don't know what the analyst's name was, but in terms of second ball winnings, Arsenal are top. No team contests them in that aspect as well. So Marcus Rashford would need to do all those things in order for him to be a success. And I think if there is significant interest in this, then I believe Arteta definitely thinks that he can do it. So I really like the player. I think he adds a lot of quality, and I think it's just a case of the finances behind it. Other than that, despite the weaknesses, despite the fact that there are things in which you look at, like I said, what Arsenal do so well, Marcus Rashford doesn't tend to do that at Manchester United. I still think that, Arteta can work around that for sure. So I do like the links, and I hope if it's financially possible, we do look into it.
Yeah, I'm very much on the same mind as you regarding this, where if we could get Rashford for, say, £60 million, and he was willing to cut his wages down to 250 per week or somewhere in that range, I think that is something that we would have to seriously consider. And there is, I think the biggest critique of this potential move that I've seen kind of floating around is the notion that Rashford isn't really someone who does the out of possession work, the off the ball work that is heavily required in Arteta systems. And I think I think the rumor that we're talking to him in the first place would go to show that that isn't something Arteta's concerned about, and Arteta's never really been someone to sign players who don't have that in the locker or can't add that to their game. So I'm not really worried about that side of it. Like you said, I think the finances are probably the major stumbling block here. But yeah, I think it's his profile that I'm really interested in. Just a very fast, wide forward, I don't really have a preference as whether it's off the right or off the left, but just someone who offers us an outlet and threat in behind in those situations, like how we played at Manchester City. I think both of you guys have said this previously, where the way United played against City in the FA Cup final is really similar to what we did at the Etihad. The only difference is United had the speed to hurt them on the counter, and we had Leandro Trossard and an injured Bukayo Saka. So we were really penned in for a lot of the game and couldn't come up with, or couldn't threaten and create that variety of chances that you need to successfully walk away from the Etihad with 3 points if you play that way. But Curran, I wanna turn to you. What do you make of the Rashford link? And is that a player that you'd like to see at Arsenal, given the right circumstances, or should we look elsewhere?
Look, I think it's a difficult one because any window, and I think this is something fans in general just don't understand as a concept. Fan channels and fans in general just they don't understand that any window has to go towards being able to fill out a certain role in terms of the general role of that window. So, say we do Rashford for 60 million, and let's say I don't know Onana, for example, or Guimaraes, or whoever you want to go with. These signings have to work together. They can't just work in one certain. Okay, this is the player we need. Plug him in, and that's it. Because you're signing other players as well. I still think for me the main you both mentioned it, the pace on the break I think is the main thing. But for me, I think the main thing in terms of this window is being able to fix the left side of that pitch. At this moment in time, we've got too many bodies in similar zones on both sides of the pitch. But the difference is on the right hand side, the dynamics are a bit more fluid, and they're allowed for a bit more Odegaard to drop, or Odegaard sometimes he peels wide. He doesn't go full physical overlap, but he'll kind of drift wide a bit and or try and pull inside centrally, and Saka will get inside. But the main thing the right has that the left doesn't have is the right has White, and White, his ability just to run down the wing and be that overlap, we don't have on the left. That's by design. I mean, we go with this inverted fullback from the left and try to push the left winger a bit wider to go 1-on-1, and then he can come inside for the back post crosses from the right hand side. But what we don't have really is the ability just to have what I would say, and I think both of you guys and the audience agree with as well, is our two best finishers in Trossard and Martinelli are both not inside the box as much as we'd like, and they're quite isolated in terms of being on the pitch. And if you want to have the finishers be on the left side, they need to be close to the goal, and that's what we're not doing right now. So for me, if you want to say have the outlet from left wing, fantastic. For that, you need a 1v1 specialist. You need someone who can take on his man from wide areas, as well as being able to sometimes put in a cross, as well as being a good ball striker to do the same roles we have at this moment in time. What I personally, and this is just me, I love to hear your two thoughts on it as well. I still think the priority is to get the left-sided White. I think to get the overlap from the left, whether it be from left centre mid, for example, an Amadou Onana who does it used to do it quite well with Alex Iwobi when he was at Everton. They both combined quite well, with Onana being that sort of physical, more hit the byline overlap, and can also track back and be that guy transition stopper as well. Or whether you're going to have someone like an Alphonso Davies or a Purvis Estupiñán, someone like that, who will be that left-sided, just bang down the line, up and down, and provide the width. So you have the ability for, say, a Marcus Rashford to come inside a bit more and be that sort of ball striker, whether it be from back post, from crosses, or be that sort of around the left side of the box finisher, where they're kind of in the space, in the half space, or just on the edge of the box where they can pick the ball up and just whack one, as it will. We've also mentioned, both of you mentioned about the transition threat, and the new buzzword that going around the Twitterverse, transitional, whatever it's called. What is it? Transitional inevitability, I think it's called. I think George made it up, or didn't make it up. I don't even know at this point. That's the new sort of buzzword, and what that kind of indicates is not just an outlet, not just pace, but the ability to be inevitable on the transition. You're not sorry. In those moments, the ability to move the ball down the pitch and either score or set something up have that sort of inevitability about them, not just be a runner who can, for example, someone like an Elanga, for example, who has great physical power, but it's not really that 1v1 finisher that you'll want in those tight moments where Rashford is, which is why, going back to the point, I'm very happy to have Rashford, but again, it has to be in a specific window. It can't just be, okay, he's the outlet, we'll just put him on. He's fairly decent 1v1 out wide as long as he's in running in transition. Just give him all the work and he'll do it all. You need to have, if you're going to have Rashford be a bit more wider, then you need another inverted fullback to come inside and provide him with those balls through the lines from the first to the final third, or the second, or someone like Zinchenko, for example, or even a Joel Hatta or something like this, where they're able to find the out to in run, as it was. So coming from wide inside, find that run and have someone be on the end of that. Or if you want to go for more of a striker, so for example, a Victor Osimhen, and then have the wide channel be the wide overlap and have the crosses in. So I think it's a case of what you do, what your preference is in terms of a window and how you fix the left side of the pitch, rather than an individual. Do I like Rashford? I like Rashford. I like Rashford a lot. And it is obviously the financial concerns as well, but it's a totality. It has to be, what are we doing in terms of fixing this left-hand side that has been the crux of Arsenal argument for the past 6 to 8 months. I think that's the major question, and either one of those two solutions is viable.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point that you make in terms of how you can't just look at individual transfers in a vacuum. You have to think about how they'll play together and how they'll fit in together. And I think, a great example of that is just this previous transfer window we had last summer, where we brought in Rice and Havertz and Timber and Raya. And the Rice and Havertz signings in particular were very linked, right? Because you had Havertz originally coming in as that left-sided eight. So you needed someone like Rice to kind of come in and, I'd imagine the plan was kind of for Havertz to work as that second striker, Timber to make his way further up the pitch. So you needed a profile like Rice to kind of sit in there as the six and work with those guys and, hopefully make up for, the bodies that we'd be moving forward defensively, make up defensively for the bodies that we'd be putting forward in attack, I mean to say. And yeah, there's just a strategy there in terms of the profiles that you're putting into the team and how they're going to work together. So yeah, I think that's a great point. And I just put up George's definition of transitional inevitability here: a forward line that consistently offers gravity of movement and physicality, which can effectively and sustainably be efficient in transition. And that is, I think, kind of the main objectives of our transfer window this coming summer, which is to make that left hand side, more fluid, kind of just more functional. I think a lot of the time, just look at Martinelli. I think is probably the best way to do this, right? Just look at how isolated he was all throughout this season. Was kind of stuck out on the wing, kind of just asked to, play hero ball to get himself into the box, and then either get himself into position to take a shot or do a cutback. It was just a lot of a burden placed on Martinelli, and maybe that's down to Timber tearing his ACL 45 minutes into the season. I don't think we'll ever really know, but fixing that left-hand side of the pitch, I think, is something that we really should aim to do with the signings. George did ask a really interesting question here.
No, he didn't. He never does.
It feels like George is the fourth member of the pod today, but I do want to ask this question before we move on to other stuff. So do you guys believe that the gaps of this season can be solved with a group of project potentials, i.e. a lack of profiles, or does the squad need marquees? Curran, I'll hand this off to you first.
No, there has to be a marquee somewhere. It has to be a player that I think what we've done this year has been able to show that we can turn up in a run-in, which we haven't done so far under this current Arteta regime. But there also has to be an like George mentioned, gravity in the definition. There has to be someone to have the ability just to take men away from certain areas, create space, as well as be able to have the on-ball quality to affect games. And I don't think you can do that without, say, a ready striker or a ready left wing, or even say a ready left back. Say you have an Alphonso Davies, which is probably never going to happen, but say that kind of signing where you have the ability to have someone that runs up and down the pitch and attacks with real quality. And I don't think you can do that without the big names at this point. I think there has to be some kind of movement that shows that there's. I'll give you an example. The Havertz winner against Brentford, the header at the back post. You put 35 or 40 crosses of those from Saka or Odegaard into an Osimhen at that back post, and that's 20 goals. I think I would say half, maybe a little bit more than half, and that is pretty deadly. And it's a very easy source of goals. Say you have Rashford running in behind from a rare goal kick, and you produce that Man City, the first moments of that Man City FA Cup final, then you can also produce goals from that sort of situation as well. And what a marquee frontline, because I do think it'll be a frontline signing, a marquee frontline signing, what that does is in the box, it will take space because it will create space for other individuals because of the gravity of that one person. We saw it with Erling when they first signed him. It does allow for De Bruyne to have more space to operate, or Bernardo, or whoever you want. It does open up more space. And what we lack right now is the ability for someone, for example, to push a back line back in the box to create space for those cutbacks that we did so well in 22-23. I think that is something we could also improve on. Creating space inside the box has been a bit of a challenge because Kai wants to, move around the box. He's not really a central presence. He's someone that will pop up in spaces inside the box. I think towards the end of the season, he was being a bit more of a box presence in terms of you can talk about the Brentford home winner or the Chelsea goal, the one where he was in the box. There's definitely examples of it, but I think there needs to be more of a gravity towards a central figure, so you can free out the likes of a Saka or a Martinelli or a Trossard, whoever you want. I think that will also create a bit more certainty and a bit more fluidity in that front line because you're having more spaces to open up for, and Havertz as well. Because if you're playing Havertz behind a central striker, then he's going to be popping up in those spaces with a bit more freedom. So yeah, I do think it has to be some kind of forward signing that moves the needle in a way that we aren't really expecting.
Rohan, what about you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we can do internally to improve next season, and we can obviously talk about that as well. But in terms of signings, I look at this window and I see it doesn't matter which way you want to go, whether it's a centre forward or a winger, as long as you fit the criteria in terms of being able to stretch the pitch, go in behind, and give me that level of ball striking that is going to allow me to be confident that a player can swing fine margins in our favour. That is what I need. That is what I need across the front line. And ultimately, you're going to get that from a marquee player as opposed to a project player. A project player, like a Sesko, for example. Links to Sesko are really interesting because I think when I'm looking at that fee, I'm looking at the package of the wages and just everything in general from a financial point of view. I think it looks really appealing, and this is a player who, if you don't acquire him now, his value skyrockets by at least doubles in 1 or 2 seasons. That's how good he is, and there's a lot of similarities in terms of to Osimhen in that type of player in terms of his ability to run the channels, how he's able to link play very quickly before spinning in behind and his ball striking, etc. There's a lot of qualities there, but you'd need a lot more patience with that. And is Arsenal's project right now in need of patience? No, it's in need of more as George alludes to, inevitability, but inevitability can come in different ways. It's about how you can create an isolation, and also, like for example, Marcus Rashford, that ball striking, that moment of magic that we need. So I do think that we need a marquee player across the front line. I think that we also need a marquee player in midfield, but that doesn't have to be of the same expense as a forward. I think the forward line, you need to put most of your money there. But then the midfield also needs bolstering as well, because I'm looking at it, and right now Arsenal only have one reliable 1v1 dueler in the middle of the park, and that's Declan Rice. Thomas Partey does not give me that level of reliability from an availability point of view, and I also think that he's physically declined. I'm seeing the game at times pass him in transition in a way that it does to Jorginho as well when the game becomes stretched. The difference between Partey and Jorginho is the fact that Partey is a lot bigger, he's got longer strides, so it's a lot better for him to cover those spaces relative to a Jorginho. So I don't have reliability there outside of Declan Rice, so I need someone there who's going to allow us to take the pressure of Declan Rice, but also to complement Declan Rice as well. And then I'm looking at the back line, and left back, I feel we're in dire need of a channel runner. I said it last season as well. I felt that you're getting rid of Kieran Tierney, you're loaning him out, and that's fine. But I do think that the way that the team is evolving, it does need that type of profile. It doesn't have to be a Kieran Tierney. In fact, I don't think Kieran Tierney has the level of quality right now as to where the project is to be that guy. But I do think that we do lack that profile. But that is very much dependent on sales, a departure, whether that's a Zinchenko or whether that's a Kivior as well. I think those two players are definitely in the market of where, if a suitable offer does come in, Arsenal will consider it. But I do think that across the back line, when we're talking about projects or marquees, I think we are able to go more with a project there than in the midfield, than in the front line as well. So yeah, that's what I think we need in terms of transfers. But I do think, and I put a tweet out before, there's a lot of things that we can do with the current crop of players that we have that can take us to 90 plus points. I very much believe that this team that we have right now can still hit 90 plus points, and that's why I do like to look more within as opposed to external, because ultimately we're at a time of the season where there's so many links to different players. I can't be bothered with that personally. Just right now, what we can do within can definitely take us above 90 points. But obviously we do need reinforcements, particularly in the front line. I do think that at baseline, it needs to be someone who can give us that pace and that threat to force teams to drop into a lower block.
I agree about the need for an overlapper on the left hand side, and we've seen Xhaka be that guy previously. So maybe we do go get someone like Onana who can come in and be that overlapper. But is it possible that Timber is able to do that?
I look at during some. I watched a couple of seasons ago. I was really hoping that Arsenal signed Lisandro Martinez, and I still think had Lisandro Martinez came here, I think his impact would have been bigger than Zinchenko. I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion or not, but I do think that he has that level of quality. But when I'm looking, I also at that time it was Timber and Martinez as the centre backs for Ten Hag. And I looked at Timber, and he's very similar in terms of the versatility that he offers across the back line. He can play wide of a free. He gives you that option as a central centre back. I personally wouldn't have that at Arsenal because of the height, and also I don't think he has the level of box presence and the ability to do what William Saliba and Gabriel does in the channels, to be able to give me confidence in that role. But you've got someone who operates at right back and is very comfortable inside and turning, receiving the ball, and then driving forward. And it's that underlapping run that he gives you. That is one of Timber's biggest qualities. And that's something, again, I'm looking at improvements that we can do from a tactical point of view. I think it's that underlapping run from the blind side of the fullback away from the centre back before then cutting inside. So you imagine Kevin De Bruyne, right? How many times do we see Kevin De Bruyne? You have Rodri or Bernardo Silva, it doesn't matter who is in possession in the right-hand side. De Bruyne is ghosting in behind of the fullback, but he's away from the centre back because the centre back can't get across quick enough because he's pinned by the centre forward. So that gives him that extra second to then whip the ball in early. And how many assists has he got time and time again? I'm not saying Timber gives you that De Bruyne level quality in the cross, but it's that run and the intent, and he will give us so much more. Mikel Arteta has spoken about how Timber offers us qualities in the attacking third that no other defender does, and that's what we've missed. But when we're talking about the left-hand side, and we saw it in the Community Shield, we saw it in other preseason games And also against Nottingham Forest in the first 45 minutes, where when Timber runs in behind, he will always look to cut in. And that's the difference between him in the left-hand side and an overlapper. An overlapper, when they go down the channel, they have that ability to hit it early. Whereas Timber, when he makes that run for the left-hand side, ultimately he'll want to come inside. And that slows down the level of attack. So I think ultimately I want that guy who is left-footed, very traditional-esque, being able to go down the channel and hit it early. And I don't think Timber can do that. Timber offers you different qualities. But then there's a massive discussion to have, right? You know, I'm looking at a lot of the points that people and a lot of the solutions that people are talking about in terms of left-hand side dynamics. And let's say Arsenal signed Bruno Guimaraes. You know, Bruno Guimaraes, Timber, Martinelli. Where's the balance there? You know, you've got 3 right-footers. Who's going to be able to go on the outside and give you that level of width and to force Martinelli to come inside? But it's not. Timber can make that run. He can go on the outside, right? But it's the level of execution and the intent that he does when he goes on the outside. He's always going to look to cut in. Same with Bruno Guimaraes if he does that, you know. And then you look at, let's say, Declan Rice is the 8th. Timber, Rice, and Martinelli. Does that solve it? It doesn't. So there's so many question marks there. But ultimately, I don't think Timber can do that specific detail, you know, of being able to overlap and hit early.
Yeah. And those are the margins at this level where you need that guy who is able to execute at that high of a level. In terms of kind of the question between whether or not you need marquee players or project players at this point of the project, I tend to agree with you guys in terms of I think you need at least one marquee player and definitely in the forward line, that guy who attracts attention. This isn't necessarily who I want us to sign, but I keep thinking, you know, if we put Rafael Leao at left wing, you know, that's a question now for teams coming into games against us. Do you continue to double triple team Saka on the right side, or do you have to pay more of that attention to Leao on the left hand side? And that either way will open things up, you know, in the middle or on the opposite flank. And you just need a player with that kind of gravity, and also, you know, not to kind of wade too far into the soft factors, but I think you'd need players who are familiar and comfortable at that level that we're going to be at, right? This is a team that's aiming to compete for the Premier League, aiming to go into the later stages of the Champions League, hopefully aiming to go a little bit further in the domestic cups than we did this season. And I think that does at some point, at some level, require players who are familiar with that, familiar with those requirements. So, and I think you saw a bit of it, you know, last season, 22-23, when most of these players ended up in their first ever, you know, title run in. And I think kind of the occasion got to them. You saw it in the Champions League, I think on multiple occasions this season when we went away to Porto and we had to play them, you know, basically for entry into the next round, and we went to the penalty shootout. I think there were some nerves there. I think we kind of played within ourselves a lot against Porto. I think Bayern was kind of a similar situation. We went 1-0 ahead. That game really should have turned into at least something resembling a comfortable win, and we let Bayern back into the game. And I think that a lot of that has to do with inexperience. So I do think experience is something that maybe gets hammered a little too much, but I think in this case, I would prefer an Osimhen or an Isak to a Sesko, even though the value's there for Sesko, because those first 2 players are familiar with the level, are experienced there, have been playing there for most of their careers. So, although I will say, if we do go on to sign a Sesko and kind of have him develop behind Havertz at center forward, give it a couple of years, bring him in, that isn't something I'll necessarily be mad at. I just think that would make it a requirement that we signed, you know, a big name midfielder or a big name overlapping left back who can come in and add more gravity to this team. I think that's a great word to describe kind of what I hope we're looking for this summer. But
No, I mean,
yeah.
sorry, just give me a sec, Sham.
No, it's true, yeah.
Look, I think the main thing with this whole window, and I think just one thing you said about Sheshko is in specific, it just reminded me. I'm not someone that goes on, oh, we have to promote youth, but you've got someone at what, Šeško's 20, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's 20 years old.
Yeah.
He's doing great. He's had a great end of the season. But if you're looking at someone that's 20, and then you've got probably your most hyped up academy graduate in the last, I don't know how many years, breaking records left, right, and center in Chido Martin, and you look at him and you're thinking, okay, maybe in 2, 3, maybe even 4 years' time, when Šeško's 24, 25, about 10 to his prime years, you're going to be wanting to get this kid in. And I'm not saying you're 100%, oh, that's the guy you're going to bank on. But for me, I would prefer to have this squad have a much more sort of ready for the moment striker in terms of having the peak years now, because the squad needs it now, first of all. And second of all, the talent we have coming through. I think you buy someone 24, 25 now, they're 29, 30 when he's theoretically ready, maybe ready sooner, maybe ready later, you don't know. But there's a much more easier transition there than people are making out. And the striker market, it gets more and more tough every year. It's not like a market that's sort of just awash with talent. I know people like Isak, but I don't like how he occupies centre backs. I think he's quite weak when it comes to that point, and I think he prefers cutting in from the left, which is great. But I don't think that's something we need right now. And he's one of the better options we have available to us. So I would prefer to go, if we're going to go for a striker, go for the ready striker, go for an Osimhen. If you can't get an Osimhen, go for a Gyökeres, who is not someone I would really put all my stock in, but. If there's something you really want a striker, then someone like him where he can pull a bit more right and give a bit more space on that left side, or maybe even pull left and have Kai move into that right side. I think I would prefer a forward. I don't know about you guys, but I would prefer a forward that pulls left. I think that we need the space is there for a left-sided forward. And the other thing is with a Šeško, you're also saying to yourself, okay, we're going to be waiting, and we don't have a squad that we don't. This is the time. You have the last year of Pep, and you're going to go into a Pepless, hopefully, Premier League if that does happen. You can't have someone that's still a year away from that being the case. So we have to be very careful, and this is why I'm when you mentioned about being more of a squad that's ready to step into that environment. This is someone I mentioned with Onana, who's risen through the ranks from the second division in Germany through Lille and Everton and gone through relegation battles, been in the moment, and now looks a bit on the outs with Sean Dyche, and is ready for a move. I think with their FFP situation, that's definitely something to look at in terms of being ready. Then you've got someone like Osimhen, obviously, there's troubles he's gone through at Napoli. Someone that's ready. These guys are ready, and they're willing to make the moves in terms of making something on the biggest stage of the Champions League. So it's not just a case of what's good, it's who's ready, because I can't have someone who's ready in 4 years. I need someone that's ready now. And we need someone ready now. And I think that's the main point in terms of this window. It can't just be, you mentioned marquees. It doesn't have to be marquees in terms of money, but it has to be marquees in terms of the ability just to slot into not even the first 11, but the 14th, 15th man able to come in for some games, provide that sort of, real impact from either the bench or from a rotation point of view. It can't just be someone that we have to groom for 2 years to get in. It's just not possible.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And also, I think that's slowly becoming the elephant in the room that a lot of people are trying to ignore, which is the fact that, we have been in project mode for a couple years now. And I still think we're a few years out from maybe the finished article, the final stage, or the final phase, excuse me. But, we are hitting a point where these guys have to be competing, have to be reaching the later stages of things, have to be, taking title races to the final weeks of the season. So we don't have that kind of time, like you said. We don't have time to sit back and wait for Šeško to turn into something. I think that's also a complaint that a lot of people have about Joel Hatto, right? We don't have time for him to develop into that top level defender that he very clearly can be. We need players who, are kind of ready here and now. So with kind of that in mind, I think it's a good moment to turn the conversation towards something that happened this previous weekend, where, bearing in mind this conversation and kind of this looming idea that Arsenal need to start winning trophies, Manchester United somehow managed to defeat Manchester City 2-0 in the FA Cup final. And that has sparked a, um, let's say, annoying conversation about who's had the better season out of Arsenal and United, right? And while I do understand the argument that at the end of the day, this is about walking away with silverware. It's about adding to your trophy cabinet, right? And United did that this season and we didn't. Would you guys take, or let me rephrase this. Do you think United actually had a better season than we did because of how the FA Cup went? Or do you disagree with that notion entirely? Rohan, it looks like you want to go first here.
It's like 90 minutes of football cannot change the opinion that drastically. Before that game, it was hands down Arsenal had a better season, right? And then 90 minutes later, all of a sudden Manchester United had a better season. It doesn't work like that. Yes, you can argue if trophy is your metric, is your metric for everything, then fine, Manchester United had a better season in that aspect. But in terms of, if we're thinking about it logically, Manchester United have been awful this season. They have broken every single record, all the bad ones under this manager. You look at the number of losses, you look at the number of shots they've conceded, more than Sheffield United, who have conceded 100 goals this season. And you have that manager who consistently refers to injuries being the reason as to why they were not able to deliver the levels that he knows that team's capable of. But that doesn't hide the fact that you've conceded the most shots in the league this season. Maybe it's not the most, maybe it's like second or third, but the point stands that it hasn't been good enough.
It's second behind pretty much one of the worst teams that's ever played in
the Premier League. Yeah. And so is injuries that significant to justify that? Of course not. They finished 8th this season. Arsenal under Wenger in the latter years, under Arteta and Emery, Emery the first half of the season, Arteta the second half of the season, we finished 8th that season, right? And that wasn't good enough, and yes, we won the FA Cup. It was fantastic. It was a huge moment in the Arteta tenure. But ultimately, when we're talking about that season as a whole, Emery's contribution and Arteta actually, one thing I don't like is how Arteta gets labelled with that 8th place finish. From the moment Arteta came in to when the league finished, Arsenal's form was as the 5th best team in the league, So that's what you have to look at from Arteta's period there. But the point stands in terms of your league performances and your consistency over 38 games is what really matters. And ultimately, Arsenal have had a much better season than Man United, because we finished 2 points behind a team that has gone on to win the 4P, a team under a manager in which only 3 coaches have been able to topple him over the course of the league season. We've got to the quarterfinals of the Champions League as well. You look at the performances, you look at the sustainability, everything points to Arsenal. And it's funny how you look at all these teams, and you look at all fans, rival fans, banter Arsenal in terms of not winning trophies, yet their clubs looking at Arsenal and Arteta as the blueprint for sustainability and long-term success. Ultimately, football, there's no guarantees, right? But the Arteta project is as close as you can get to a guarantee outside of, obviously, Man City winning the Premier League again under Pep Guardiola. That is one of the big guarantees that you have as a common opinion amongst fans. I disagree with it slightly. I think Arsenal win it next season, but other other things that are dead certain in my head is that Arsenal are going to win trophies under Arteta. So I'm looking at every single metric, and Arsenal had a better season. I don't see how an FA Cup win, and I think it should be taken seriously, because it is a major trophy in my eyes. The FA Cup is massive, but at the same time, what they've done in the league this season, what they've done in the cups, in other cups this season, their Champions League group stage performances doesn't get recognised much as well. They had one of the easiest groups and they went out. They finished 4th. They didn't even get into the Europa League. So it's like I don't understand it. It's like Arsenal. Arsenal are in a better position next season. Manchester United aren't, and that is what matters, really. So it's just a lot of nonsense.
Curran, how about you?
Honestly, I'm going to be completely frank with you. I don't give a shit. I just don't care. They had a season. They wanted the manager out. They wanted the manager in. They wanted the manager out. Now they want the manager back in. It reminds us, like, this is their second season, and all I know is the main thing for me is I went in, week out, knowing that more than likely or not, I was going to enjoy a game of football this season. Every week for 8 to 10 months, however long it is, I went in, whatever game it was. All right, we're going to have a game here. It's going to be something. I'm looking forward to this 2 hours of football. Do you think United fans had that this season? I don't think so. I remember Wolves, the first game of the season, where Onana comes out and tries to assault a man from in the penalty box. Like, I remember Bournemouth just rocking up to Old Trafford and just completely wiping them. I remember just like game after game, you can go against Palace, they got wiped 4-0. Like, I can go through plenty of games where they just weren't good at football. And if you want to say you had a better season because of the FA Cup, I really don't care. That's your prerogative. That's your opinion. For me, all I know is I enjoyed our season. I know how much I enjoyed our season. There were things that annoyed me this season a lot, especially the first half of the season, the central access problems. We had problems with conceding goals from mistakes at left back. We had issues with our forwards not being able to hit a barn door towards the end of December, the physical drop off, etc. I can go through tons of problems we had, but I knew every game, including Fulham and West Ham, including the Fulham home game, including the game where we dropped points against Spurs, all the games that we dropped points in, all 10 of them, I knew that even if something was to happen and it didn't happen, I knew that we were going to put on a performance or a game of football that I would enjoy. And 90 to 95% of the time that happened. I don't think United can say the same. And if they did, then fair enough. I misread your fan base. But yeah, for me, it's not something I care about. All I know is that we are going to be in the Champions League next year. We're going to be in the biggest Champions League in terms of match day revenue, in terms of the new format, in terms of all these different things. So there's a real anticipation for next season, and that's where my head is at. It's not at, oh, they won an FA Cup and we didn't. Wow. I just don't care. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. I'll put it to you like this, right? I've talked to a few United fans over the course of the season, and not one of them was happy until the FA Cup match, right? Every single one of them had no idea what Ten Hag was doing, weren't really looking forward to watching their team play on a regular basis, had concerns about kind of the long-term future of the club, and none of that really changes because of the FA Cup win, right? I think maybe the one thing this does indicate is that Ten Hag decided to play in a very coherent manner against City, and he got something for it. But to say that because they won an FA Cup trophy, it means that they've had the better season than us, I think is honestly ignorant at best and probably a bad faith argument most of the time. For Arsenal, we had our most league wins in a season, most goals in a league season. There's a Ryan O'Hanlon article that came out a couple weeks ago that basically was talking about how we've scored more goals, conceded less, and had an averaged more points per game than the usual Premier League title winner. Right? Our goal difference and our points tally would win the league 17 times since 1994, 1995. If we'd beaten Everton by 4 goals, that would have gone up to 18 times. So, this is a team that has achieved something this season. This is a team that if it weren't for Manchester City, if it weren't for, Pep Guardiola and that club and all of the controversy that comes with that, we're looking at a very deserving title winner in Arsenal Football Club, and there's no indication that there's going to be any drop off from that kind of a performance next season, or even the season after that. On the flip side, like you guys kind of indicated here, United are kind of going back and forth between whether or not they want to keep Ten Hag on, right? And maybe that's down to winning an FA Cup. Maybe that's down to the fact that they know that the next couple of years are going to be painful and they don't want to bring in a guy that they like just to have to get rid of them. If it goes tits up, maybe they want Ten Hag to be the fall guy for, the difficult part of the rebuild that they desperately need to do. So, and another thing is just the FA Cup is not, the Premier League and the Champions League typically require your club to be on a trajectory toward an elite level. Although maybe Dortmund disproved that
This
slightly.
is the thing with the Champions League. It's any team. Like, I'm not saying it to discredit, but any tournament type competition has an element of who do we play, how do moments go? Do you win the moments? It's not as. This is why the league for me has always been, especially growing up. Like when I grew up 90s, 2000s, it wasn't till about, I would say, the Abramovich era where Chelsea took over, when Europe started becoming more of like, okay, we'll take it seriously. This kind of thing matters now. And then obviously with Messi and Ronaldo, we went to a different stratosphere, the European competitions. But in England, it was, when I was growing up, I don't know if you found this, Rohan, but when I was growing up, the league was everything. Europe was nice. Europe was an addition. It was nice. If you could do something in it, great. But the league was the league. That was what you did. That's what your season was judged on, everything. So this is going to come across a bit disingenuous because we haven't won the Champions, or we haven't won the Europa or whatever. But the thing is when you go forward, and I don't agree with the whole it's going to be two or 3 years for United, because we've seen them in the past be able to bounce back, and teams can bounce back into European competitions quite easily. Like one good window and some other teams not doing as well, you can bounce. Look at Spurs this season. They were very close to Champions League this year. That you can bounce back into these things. But in terms of United versus us, it's just a case of one team is for 2 years now competing on a title level. The other team had competed well in Ten Hag's first season. They recovered from a very bad start and got third, and then fell off at the end. And now are eighth. There's no consistency there. It has to be, if I can see 2 or 3 years of like, okay, top 4, maybe a title challenge, something like this, then maybe. But right now they're still in that baby phase of what are we doing? We're still trying to develop what we want to do as a club.
I think it's one of those ones where a cup, there's always luck in football, right? You always need luck in football to achieve a desired outcome. But ultimately, the levels of luck are so much higher in terms of in the cup competitions. When you're in the cup, if you get a favourable draw, like Corin says, you have a really good opportunity to do something special. Whereas in the league, it's consistency over 38 games. Now, the only element of luck I would say that comes with the league is obviously refereeing decisions, but injuries is the massive one. But the reality is that when I look at the league over every single season in Premier League history, I wouldn't say any of those teams that won it were lucky to win it. Whereas you can look at certain teams that have won in the cups, both in the Champions League, FA Cups, Carabao Cups. There's an element of luck involved there. So if you were to ask me the next season, what would I want, the Premier League or the Champions League? It'd be the Premier League, hands down. I think there's always that element of wanting the Champions League so bad because we've never won it. But let's say Arsenal do win a Champions League, right? Let's say Arsenal had won a Champions League. I'd want to win the league every single season over the Champions League, because the league is what matters. It's your bread and butter. It's your consistency. Like I said, over a significant sample size against other teams across the country, that's what matters to me more. And the reality is that, Manchester United, ultimately, you have to look at it this way. What team is going to be able to work in a more sustainable manner when you consider their seasons this year? Manchester United's or Arsenal's? It's obviously Arsenal's. So you take Arsenal's every single day of the week. And I think the enjoyment part, what Corin says, is really true, because I tweeted this out and I said, if your only enjoyment from football comes from your team winning a trophy, then I don't think football is necessarily for you. Well, because effectively you're saying that, let's say we consider the league, right? You are only happy on the final game week. Let's say it goes to the final game week as well.
Yeah.
You're only happy when the full-time whistle blows on game week 38 for a week or two. That's the only time.
Not even that. Not even that. Like a couple of days.
Yeah, exactly. That's exaggerating a bit slightly potentially, but a few days after. Is that the only time you enjoy football? No. You enjoy the journey and the process of how your team plays. And this is where I find it very funny when you get comments and opinions, and everyone's entitled to their own viewpoint. But when I hear people say, I'd rather us play rubbish, boring football and win 1-0 every single game that guarantees us a title, I wouldn't want that because I wouldn't enjoy it. It's there's so many different things to consider, and actually clubs look at it more from this viewpoint as opposed to how that type of fan sees it. So
all I'm saying is that we beat Chelsea 5-0 earlier this season, and that was one of the most fun.
April.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most that might be one of the most fun games I've ever watched in my life, especially when Havertz put his 2 goals in. And I think that's absolutely right. I can't remember the last time I wasn't looking forward to watching Arsenal play. Right? Even like the high stakes games, right? When we went to the Etihad, when we had to play Bayern, I was nervous as hell, but I wasn't, I was still excited.
You know what it is?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what it is, right? Before going to the Etihad, going to Old Trafford, it was nervous to see if we could try and nick something, maybe nick a draw. Now it's nervous that we'll drop points. That's the perfect way of putting it.
Yeah.
Before we'd always been maybe we could nick a 0-0, maybe just scam a 1-0, something like that. Now I went to that Old Trafford game. I was like, if we lose this game, if we drop points in this game, I don't even know. We have to win this game. That is the ultimate change. And the last thing I will say on this is we're talking about the league and the European League. I think if you look in terms of when you win a league title, what is more likely? If you win a league title and fall off to go 8th, or win a European title and fall off to go 8th, it's the European title. Because if you have a squad that is consistent enough to win a league for 38 games, the likelihood of that falling off to an 8th position or a 10th position or 12th position, whatever it is much less likely than it would be, for example, in a Champions League position. And obviously the Champions League is probably the biggest prize in European football. But the thing is, when you look at it and you think, what is going to be the most consistent form of success? And it's always going to be a league season. If you can get a league season and be the top of the league for how many days and win that trophy, it's a much more brighter indication for what's going to happen going forward than it would be Champions League. I mean, we saw obviously the Roman stuff changed Chelsea's trajectory for a completely off a spear, so it can't really be compared. But even the season before, they were struggling for top 4. I think they got 3rd, and then before the whole situation happened, and then Tuchel left, and then they are now in wherever they are now. So, but there's a much higher likelihood of you being a better team if you're able to win a league campaign than would be for a Champions League campaign. So. And that's the same thing goes to the FA Cup. I've seen multiple teams not be good enough to win anything, but manage to get to an FA Cup final or get to an FA Cup win. Same with us. When we were 8th, we weren't good enough to win a league, but we managed to get a period of 5 or 6 games together where we beat Man City, we beat Chelsea in the final, and we did that and we won it, and it was a great feeling. But I wouldn't say we were a top 4 team. Wouldn't say we were, as Rohan mentioned, we were, even after Mikel came in, we were only 5th in the league that year. So the league is a much more better assertion of what can happen going forward, and the stability of a club, because the stability of the club at Arsenal is much more secure than it would be at United or Chelsea, where directors are coming in and going and staff are coming in and going, coaches, managers, players, whatever. It's much more secure. So that's the main thing I would take away from this whole debate, as it were.
Yeah, and I think this is a great point here in the comments where they were an offside away from being out of the FA Cup. They finished with -1 goal difference. It's the first time they've finished with a negative goal difference in Premier League history. Their worst finish in the Premier League. They embarrassed themselves pretty soundly in the Champions League as well. My point of the Champions League thing was just that you still have to be a good team to make it into the Champions League, right? And with the FA Cup, we won that when we were still at the very beginning of our rebuild, and then we saw shit. Why am I forgetting the name of the team that almost beat United in the semifinal this season?
Coventry.
That was Coventry.
Coventry, yeah. Coventry almost made the final to play Manchester City. So it goes to show, especially with the domestic cups, and also with the Champions League as well. There is that level of randomness, of chance to it. So I completely agree that the Premier League is the best indication of how good a team is. But yeah, well, last subject before we have to get out of here and put a bow on this. Especially speaking on the subject of whether or not Ten Hag's going to stay or he's going to go, there's been a very interesting managerial merry-go-round happening, with teams like United and Chelsea, and even Bayern has gotten in on this, where it seems that young project managers are really being favored now by bigger clubs, right? United and Chelsea are essentially competing for Kieran McKenna out of Ipswich. Chelsea have now settled on Enzo Maresca from Leicester. United also were, looking at McKenna and kind of deciding whether or not to get rid of Ten Hag. And Bayern, very interestingly, have hired Vincent Kompany from Burnley. And so I just want to, before we get out of here, I just want to get your thoughts on this apparent theme that clubs are following with hiring these younger managers and investing in them long term. And is that something that is attributable to what we've done with Arteta? And Curran, I'll hand this off to you first.
I mean, you've missed one point off there. It's young, up and coming, and a connection to Pep. Those are the three that everyone wants. Everyone wants that holy triad of attributes. And look, honestly, it's another of like, if they want to try it, great. But if that's the way they think that they can succeed, it's a tip of a cap to us, which is fair enough. But at the end of the day, we've seen neither Bayern, United, or Chelsea have the patience to stick through the time and really give a manager the tools and the time they need. And you saw with Poch, after they got battered by us, they kind of went on a bit of a run. They looked like, well, they found a system without Enzo and Caicedo, with Cucurella inverting, and they sort of were kind of getting to grips with the system there. And then they fired Poch. So they could talk all they want about watching All or Nothing or whatever they want to say, but until there's tangible evidence of there actually being something there where it's been 2-3 years and they haven't won a title. Maybe they've got into the Europa League a couple of years, or they've gone through a Europa League campaign and then failed at the last hurdle, something like this, and still stuck by a manager because they gave Potter a 6-year contract. What are they going to do with that? Bayern gave Tuchel a 3-year contract, I'm pretty sure, and he bailed out after 2 because it just wasn't good enough, and they weren't even having a bad season. I'm not gonna hear this from people because everyone goes, "Oh, you went out to this terrible Bayern side with Eric." They were having a good season. They had some of the best XG totals in all of Europe. They had
most goals in Europe as well. I think it was
goals in Europe as well. But they came up against a crazy Leverkusen side, and they came second. I think they even came third. If I'm not mistaken.
Third, they came third. Yeah.
So they kind of, I think, gave up after the Champions League semi-final. So then I don't think they're a bad side. It's just that the pressures at these clubs that aren't Arsenal, and this is one thing I will give us a lot of credit for, and I don't really care what anyone says, is that we provided a system where the pressure was not on the managers, the pressures were on the players to stay. And if you weren't going to stay, you're going to get terminated or you're going to get sold. And I think the whole thing with Ozil, Aubameyang, these kind of guys, obviously the Lacazettes after the 21-22 season, Mustafi, who yes was offered a contract but was pretty much moved on. There was other ones that weren't done as well, like Javon's favorite player in Rob Holding, that weren't really put on a that was what I wanted. They were kept a bit longer, but there was a real understanding that either you perform or you leave, and it's not going to be Arteta that's going to leave. And they don't have these clubs, United and Chelsea, don't have the ability to say, look, this is our guy. Either you do what he says or you're going to leave, because one, ownership changes, two, the fan bases and the culture around the club is not something that is particularly well. And even with us, when we were going 8, the amount of times we had to debate with people and the same fights again and again about Arteta.
Yeah.
And it's a funny thing, because everyone's now apparently was Arteta out at one point. People pull up one tweet that you're upset with Arteta, and apparently you were Arteta out for a point. And a lot of it is really annoying, because I can pull up streams after the Man City 5-0, and I was still like, don't sack him. And I can point to evidence of that. I can point to evidence of me saying things, and it doesn't matter, because every Arsenal fan wanted him out at some point. So it's different with them. It's not the same, because Chelsea have this culture of hiring and firing. They haven't got a culture where the fan base is able to accept that, look, not everything's great right now, but we have to try and build something to make it great. They don't have that mentality. We had Wenger. We gave Emery a chance after he lost the Europa League final. We didn't fire him in the tunnel. We tried, and then he got us to 11th. We don't have that with the Chelsea. You don't have that with the United. They fire guys. That's their thing. So if they can prove that wrong, then we can have a conversation. 2 or 3 years down the line, we can have this conversation, but not now. You haven't got any evidence of doing it, so I don't want to hear any of that bullshit. Go watch All or Nothing again. It was great.
Yeah, I think it's so funny that Chelsea have kind of come out, or not come out, but reports have come out basically saying that Chelsea are going to give this new manager patience. But where is patience for Pochettino?
Yeah.
This, like, the underlying statistics said that Chelsea in the second half of the season were a top 4 team.
Yeah.
And they're playing like one. They started to click, and then you went and fired him for what? So I have a hard time believing that there's going to be any sort of patience on Chelsea's end, especially just because I think Chelsea and United. I think this point about kind of backing the manager and putting the pressure on the players is a really good one, because United especially do this thing where they just bring in the big name players that they can get off of PSG or off of Real Madrid. Kind of more so just for jersey sales and to look like a big club. And we saw what happened with Cristiano Ronaldo when he had a problem with how the club was being run. He went on Piers Morgan and embarrassed everybody.
I still
right?
maintain he was right. I know that the way he went about it was wrong. I maintain that he was right about what he said. That club is falling apart, and the ownership don't care.
He made great points. Yeah, no, I don't think anything he said was wrong, but that's
He shouldn't have done that, obviously.
Yeah,
But
it's just the manner of it, wasn't it?
yeah.
Yeah. Like, I'd be furious if an Arsenal player did that,
Yeah,
but that's the thing.
100%.
We don't sign players who are going to do that. So, I think it's all well and good for Chelsea United to bring in these young managers and talk about watching All or Nothing and wanting to emulate Arteta, but at the end of the day, that's just one piece of it. Right? It's just I feel like they're really trying to copy and paste and not do the work of going through the rebuild, of kind of having to sit with, the embarrassment and shame of being where you are and having to get out of it, that Chelsea and United need to do. I will say with Bayern, I do think it's a really interesting hire, just because I think Vincent Kompany.
I think it's going to fail spectacularly, personally.
Really?
But, yeah,
Oh,
I think he's an underrated manager. I do think that time with Burnley, there's the Premier League season, always going to be a tough ask to keep them in the Prem, playing the way he plays. But reports have been throughout the year that his man management is very strict, and that's not going to go down well at Bayern, because they are a very drama-heavy club. If he gets into spats with a Sane or a Musiala or someone, that's not going to go down well. Two, you're in a league with Leverkusen, you're expected to win straight away. And does he have the experience to go and win a league in Germany at the top level? It's going to be interesting, and I don't think
yeah.
I don't think that it will be a case where he's a bad hire. It's just a case of it's just not the right time. He shouldn't be there right now. It's just that's just. I think he's actually a pretty decent coach in terms of what he did with Burnley. Decent coach, it's just a bad appointment at the time. They needed someone to be able to stabilize the ship, try and figure out who they want to stay and who they want to go, and that's not company. Company's just going to shout at everyone. And if he tries to shout at the likes of a Thomas Muller or a Jamal Musiala or a Sane, it's just not going to go down well.
Yeah, I do remember that one video that was doing the rounds a while ago of company in the dressing room.
All the Bayern fans have been posting that video, the one with him at Anderlecht shouting at the guys,
screaming.
I'm telling you, that's just not going to go down well at Bayern. Like Kane will appreciate it because Kane's a bit of a pussy. Let's be real. But the rest of them, it's not really something that you've got winners there like Thomas Muller. Thomas Muller isn't going to get shouted at. It's just not going to happen. So we'll see. I mean, I'm more than happy to be proved wrong. I wish him well. Another Pep disciple in circulation, ruining apparently. But we'll see what happens.
I think the idea is interesting. Well, also, I mean, I'll preface this by saying I think they hired company because everyone else said no, right?
True.
But I think the idea is interesting because maybe Bayern need to take a look at themselves in the mirror after this previous season and just, how things have kind of shaken out for them over the last couple of years. So I don't know. I'll be rooting for company. I think it is. Yeah. It's a big job, and it's kind of a similar situation to Chelsea United, where you just don't have that environment to take the hits that you need to take to complete the rebuild. But yeah, we'll see.
I think it's interesting because Bayern Munich did go along down that route before they hired Thomas Tuchel, but to a much higher level than company in Julian Nagelsmann, and they didn't have the patience for him as well. So I think. I find it quite interesting, the trend in modern football now to these positional coaches. Ultimately, each coach has their own ideology, own way of playing in terms of behaviors. I think analysis in today's day there's not enough coverage on actual behaviors of a team. It's more down on structures, etc. A lot of teams have very similar structures, but it's the behavior and the intent. And what I'm seeing is a lot of teams are investing in that project type of philosophy, and they're looking at that Arteta project. People don't want to hear it, but they're looking at Arsenal in terms of how he's transformed that squad that was depleting, aging, with very little value into one that is now the second most valuable in world football. Which is the second youngest in the Premier League, and in doing so, in which he spent less money in terms of strictly transfer fees. We're getting to agent fees and loans. And not agent fees and contracts it will even boost our argument even more. But Arsenal under Arteta has spent less money than Manchester United, Man City, Chelsea, Tottenham. The only team that they haven't spent more money than is Liverpool. And teams are looking at what Arsenal are doing in Arteta, and they're seeing that as a blueprint because, like I alluded to earlier, yes, there are no guarantees in football, but in terms of sustainability and the likelihood of guaranteeing success in football, you're looking at that Arteta project. And I'm seeing across the division, in the Premier League, strictly speaking, we have gone past that era of needing a Steve Bruce, needing an Alan Pardew, needing a Tony Pulis, that type of mold of manager to save teams down at the bottom. You look at the teams down at the bottom. You've got McKenna at Ipswich. I can't remember what the Southampton coach's name is again, but
Russell Martin.
That's it. Leicester obviously had Enzo. Then you look at other teams. You look at Bournemouth with Areola. You look at Gary O'Neill at Wolves. Brighton obviously were looking at McKenna. They had De Zerbi. You just Everton with Sean Dyche. All these teams are going for these type of managers, where not all positional. Don't get me wrong, but there is a trend of teams going for that project because they see it as more sustainability. And I do find it very interesting the amount of changes during the top end of the table. You look at Chelsea with Enzo. I do think the way that Chelsea are playing towards the latter stages of Pochettino's era in terms of how he was inverting Cucurella, there's a lot of stylistic similarities that will allow Enzo to fit in well there. But there's different behaviors. You're looking at Pochettino is a lot more transition based. Enzo is very much of that mold of slower build up, being from that Pep disciple. I look at Liverpool under Arne Slot, quite interesting in terms of what they're going to go for. But what I do find good for Liverpool in that sense is that they're going for someone who's stylistically similar to Klopp in terms of counter pressing, and that being a key blueprint in their methodology and the way that they play. Manchester United is still very much up in the air. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting movements at the top of the table. But ultimately, I think what it shows to me is that what we're going to see next season is very much of 22-23, where it's going to be Arsenal, Manchester City, Arsenal taking it to the end though, as we did obviously the season that's just passed. Whereas these other teams, I think you're going to see a little bit more of a transition period. So yeah, but I think it's very interesting, and the company one I'm looking at. It's quite funny because I feel like he sacrificed Burnley to get a better job. You know, if he kind of deviated away from his methodology and his ideas, I don't think Bayern Munich would have looked at Vincent Kompany. They've looked at him.
The main thing with Burnley is he stuck with Trafford. I think if he didn't stick with Trafford, if he switched earlier, they could have stayed up because Trafford was underperforming drastically, and they had Muric, I think his name is.
He was having some poor games as well, though, weren't he? I don't know. I didn't watch all of Burnley.
No, but he was playing at a better level, and I think the switch came too late, and then that kind of cost them. But I mean, we saw them against us. They when we went away and we just emptied their stadium. It was pretty academic when we went there. But yeah, I think the main thing with all these coaches and all these things is, there's all well and good hiring these guys, but I'm going to keep saying it. Will the actual club back them? If a club backs them and actually gives them 3, 4, 5 years and says, whatever happens, we will do the best we can to make you and give you the resources. And you look at guys like Maresca, who have left Leicester with who had a much superior squad than the rest of the Championship. He's now gone to Chelsea and is now probably going to be expected to get top 4 straight away. And you look at his system, how is he fitting Caicedo in that system? Doesn't make much sense. Is he going to invert James? Is it going to be a James inverted, who's probably one of the best overlaps in world football? Are you going to invert Cucurella and then keep Enzo deep? Like there's definitely it's going to be problems, and they're not going to be easy to solve in that for season 1. And they could get top 4 with the right window. They could definitely get top 4, but it's not going to be as easy as guys think. And I think there's a lot of expectation for them to not do well, but entitlement that they must do well because that's what they're meant to be. But there's going to be a lot of those teams in that third to 7th, third to 8th bracket. So it's going to be very tough. And I don't think a lot of these clubs have the ability just to say, we get it. You finished 6th this year, we'll go again next year. I don't think that's in a lot of these clubs' DNA.
No, I feel like we're probably watching a couple teams lock themselves into kind of a rinse cycle of just hiring young managers and just witnessing them go through the typical rebuild process and then saying that's not good enough, firing and restarting. So, if that's what Chelsea and United want to be in, a vicious cycle of hiring and refiring, who am I to question it? But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Anyway, we will call it there. It has been honestly a really, really fun conversation. Thank you both for being on. There's about just under 2,400 of you watching, so please do follow Rohan at Rohan Javan AFC. Please do follow Curran at Curran TOF. Let them know where they can find your work, fellas.
Am I going first? Is he going first? Are we going? Okay, I'll go first. Yeah. You can find me at Curran TOF on Twitter. Do follow the BOP footy Twitter account, Ball of a Passion on YouTube. We will be starting the streaming soon. I will be starting my own personal channel at some point, probably after the Euros. I'm not doing Euros predictions. It's just going to be long. I'm serious. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not looking forward to this Euros. I just can't be asked. I have no. I know when it starts, I'll be like, I'll probably get into it, but right now, I just go away. I don't care. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I think the main thing to take away in terms of this is just just have a break, guys. Seriously, that's the main thing. The transfers will happen at some point. But yeah, it's been lovely to talk to both of you.
Yeah, you can just find me on that Twitter handle. I don't even want to say it; it just doesn't sound right. But
You'll get used to it.
that's it. Yeah.
I'll get used to it.
And you can follow the pod at This Week Arsenal on Twitter. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, please do like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please do leave us that 5-star review. Really helps with getting the pod out there so more people find it and listen to it and kind of complete that cycle. So thank you so much for being here with us and listening to us kind of chat about Arsenal and other things today. But on that note, we will talk to you next week, probably Tuesday, maybe Monday. We'll see. And until then, don't be a goon, or be a gooner. Don't be a goon. And we will talk to you soon. Take care and goodbye.
Maybe we'll have a good surprise for you.